there lived a husband and wife. For a long time they already wanted to have a child, but he was not there.
Oh.
One day, my wife fell ill. The husband asked her what she wants the most. The wife replied that there was a magnificent garden nearby, where many of the most beautiful flowers grow. There is a beautiful Rapunzel in the garden. It looked so fresh and so green that she really wanted to taste it. But the garden was surrounded by a high fence, and no one dared to enter it, since this garden belonged to one witch. She possessed great power, and everyone in the world feared her. The husband loved his wife very much, and decided to get a Rapunzel for her, no matter what it cost him. And so at dusk he climbed over the stone fence into the sorceress's garden, in a hurry picked up a whole handful of green Rapunzel, and brought it to his wife. She immediately made herself a salad from it, and ate greedily. She liked this salad so much that the next day she wanted even more than before. The husband made his way into the garden again, but the witch was already standing in front of him. She glared at him angrily and said that he would pay a lot for stealing the Rapunzel. He asked the witch not to be angry, because he tore off the Rapunzel for his wife, who was very ill. And he loves her so much.
Okay.
The witch's anger passed a little, and she said that if it was true, she would allow him to collect as much Rapunzel as he wanted, but on one condition. He will have to give the witch the child who will be born to his wife. The husband agreed with fear. When the wife gave birth to a daughter, the witch immediately appeared, took the child with her, and named her Rapunzel. Rapunzel became the most beautiful girl in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch locked her in a tower. That tower was in the forest, and it had no doors or stairs. Only at the very top was a small window. When the witch wanted to climb the tower, she called Rapunzel to pull her sides down. And Rapunzel had long, beautiful hair. She hears the voice of the witch, loosens her braids, ties them up to the window hook, and the hair falls down, and the witch then climbs up, clinging to them.
Hello.
Several years passed, and the king's son happened to ride a horse through the forest where the tower stood. Suddenly he heard singing, and it was so pleasant that he stopped and began to listen. Rapunzel sang it in her wonderful voice. The prince wanted to climb up. He began to look for the entrance to the tower, but it was impossible to find him. He once saw how the witch climbs up the braids that Rapunzel lowered her. And the next day, when it was already getting dark, the prince drove up to the tower and called Rapunzel. She heard, pulled her braids down, and the prince climbed up. Rapunzel, seeing that a man she had never seen came to her, was very frightened at first. But the prince spoke to her affectionately and said that his heart was so touched by the singing that he decided to see her without fail. Then Rapunzel ceased to be afraid, and when he asked if she agreed to marry him, she gave her consent and held out her hand to him. But they just did not know how to go down together. They figured out that when the prince came, he would always take a piece of silk with him, and Rapunzel would weave a ladder out of it. And when the ladder is ready, they will go down it together and leave. The sorceress did not notice anything until one day Rapunzel asked why it is easier to drag the prince up. The sorceress understood everything, got angry and clutched in rage at Rapunzel's beautiful hair. I wrapped them around my left arm several times, and with my right grabbed the scissors and cut them off. She took the sorceress into the dense thicket of Rapunzel and hid her there. She tied the severed braids to the window hook, and when the prince appeared, she pulled them down. The prince climbed up and saw the witch. She looked at him with her malicious look and said that he would never see Rapunzel. The king's son was beside himself with grief and jumped out of the tower in despair, but the thorny thorns of the bushes, on which he fell, gouged out his eyes. The blind prince wandered for several years in grief and sorrow through the forest, all the time grieving and crying for his beloved lost. Once he went into a dense thicket. Suddenly the prince heard someone singing. It seemed so familiar to him, and he went to meet him. When he came closer, Rapunzel recognized him, threw herself on his neck and cried bitterly with joy. 2 tears fell in his eyes, and the prince regained his sight and began to see as before. He brought her to his kingdom, and they lived for many, many years in happiness and joy.
Once upon a time there was an old goat. She had 7 kids. She loved them as much as only a mother can love her children. She was going to go into the forest, bring herbs and branches for lunch. She called all her children and warned them to be afraid of the evil wolf. He often pretends, but you can immediately recognize him by his rude voice and black paws. The kids understood everything and assured their mother that they would be very careful. The old goat set off calmly. Little time has passed. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door and shouted in a rude voice that the kids should immediately open it. But the kids from the rough voice realized that it was a wolf. They answered that it was not Mother's voice. Her voice was kind and thin, and this voice was very rude, which means it was a wolf. Then the wolf went to the merchant and bought himself a large piece of chalk. He ate it, and his voice became thin. He came back, knocked on the door, and in a thin voice asked the kids to open it. The wolf put its paw on the window and waits. And the kids saw her and answered that the mother's paws were not black, but white, which means it was a wolf. Then the wolf ran to the bakery and asked to give him some dough. The wolf anointed his paw with the dough. The villain approached the door for the 3rd time, put his white paw on the window and knocked. They saw the kids that the paw was white and thought that it was their mother. They opened the door, but there was a wolf in front of them. They got scared and began to scatter in all directions. One kid jumped under the table, another on the bed, the 3rd on the stove, the 4th into the kitchen, the 5th into the closet, the 6th under the sink, and the 7th hid in the grandfather clock. But the wolf found them all, opened its jaws and swallowed one by one. Only one thing he did not find: the youngest, who hid in the clock. Having eaten his fill, the wolf left. He stretched out on a green meadow under a tree and fell asleep. Soon an old goat came home from the forest. Oh, what did she see there? The door was wide open. The table, chairs, benches were overturned. The wash basin was broken. Pillows and blankets were thrown from the bed. She began to look for her children, but she could not find them anywhere. I called them by name, but no one answered. She went up to the clock, and in response there was a thin voice of the youngest kid. She took him out of there, and he said that a wolf came and ate everyone. How the goat cried for her poor children. Finally, she left the house, and the youngest kid ran after her. She came to the meadow, so a wolf was lying by the tree and snoring, so that the branches were trembling. She looked at him from all sides and saw that in his swollen belly something was moving and floundering. She guessed that these were her children, and was very happy that they were still alive. She told the kid to run home as quickly as possible and bring scissors, a needle and thread. Then the goat cut the belly of the wolf with scissors, and from there one kid stuck out its head. And then the others jumped out, all six, and nothing bad happened to them. What a joy it was! They began to hug their mother, jump and dance. Then the old goat said it would be nice to teach the wolf a lesson while he was still sleeping. They pulled stones and stuffed them into the wolf's belly. An old goat sewed up his belly, but he did not notice anything, never even moved. The wolf slept, got to his feet and felt such a thirst in his belly that he decided to drink water from the well. He barely approached the well, bent down to the water, and heavy stones pulled him to the bottom of the well. 7 kids saw this, and began to dance for joy with their mother. That's how they taught the evil wolf a lesson.